Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. Today I'm going to discuss with you the top 5 places that I believe in banking if you have quite a large amount of money. And so we'll just loosely say this has to be in the 7 figures. If you're talking about below that, then you're going to be in sort of a different category, but 7 for sure, 8 and 9 figures, definitely you want to be there. If you're below, you can still take advantage of some of these, but you're going to be much more limited. So I'll go through for you. So what are the 5 places for banking when you have a lot of money? Let's dive in. Before we do, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, hit the all notification bell. Thank you for your support. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like help with setting up banking around the world, optimizing your taxes, forming companies, relocating abroad, doing citizenship by investment, residencies by investment, etc., please reach out to us. You can book a call, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer, link in the description below, or send a message to our websites, offshorecitizen.net and offshorecapitalist.com. Okay, so I was having lunch with a client recently, and we were just discussing this topic of, okay, where are the places to bank? And the context here is, where do you feel comfortable putting a significant amount of money? Because you can open a bank account in Belize, you can open a bank account in Puerto Rico or in Lithuania or Georgia or Ukraine or whatever. And there's some spectrum of solidity to those different places, right? In some cases, you're going to have deposit insurance limits. For example, some of the banks in Montenegro went down a few years ago, and it was a 50,000 euro deposit insurance limit, right? Now, normally I say if you have to worry about deposit insurance, it's probably a bad situation to begin with, but gives you a little bit of context where I just wouldn't want to put hundreds of thousands of dollars into banks like that or into jurisdictions like that at all. And this leads to the question of, okay, when you start getting up into the high 6 figures and above, in particular 7 and 8 figures, you're suddenly in a position where deposit insurance is not going to cover you anywhere. The highest anywhere in the world that I'm aware of is $1 million. Usually it's 250,000 or 100,000, somewhere in that range. So you're beyond the deposit insurance schemes, and you start to have to worry about other factors. So where does that leave you? In my view, and I'm going to contextualize this by, if you're living in certain countries, the local banking system actually is pretty solid. For example, if you're in Germany, Canada, Australia, the likelihood that the bank is going to go under and you're going to lose your money is probably quite low. Now, there might be other risks, right? That's another conversation, but these are typically pretty solid banks. This being said, unless you actually are a resident there, you typically can't open a bank account in these places. So as foreigners, those are all out. This then asks, okay, well, as a non-resident, as a foreigner, where are solid places that you can open accounts? So I would say number 1 is Singapore. To me, kind of the gold standard of banking around the world at this point in time is Singapore. I would rather be banking in Singapore than anywhere else for large amounts of money. If you're going to put $10,000 or $20,000 in there, you probably won't even be able to get an account. But if you're in a situation where you're saying, hey, I'm going to be leaving quite a lot of capital there, this would be a great place where they have high quality banking, the banks are quite safe, everything works really well, it's quite disconnected from a bunch of the other global influences, etc. So I like that. Okay, so that's place number 1. Place number 2 is Switzerland. Some people will bash Switzerland in various ways, mainly because of the fees. But the truth is you get quite high quality banking at the top banks there. We'll do maybe an interview soon with one of our private bankers from there and kind of go through and discuss a little bit of it so you get kind of a bit of different perspective. The challenge here is it's usually $1 million minimum as a deposit. And so, that's, if you're not prepared to deposit $1 million, then you're just not going to be able to get the banking. Now, that's not money that sits. It doesn't have to sit, and nor should it sit. It's money that you're going to invest. But the point is, you're still taking that money from Interactive Brokers or Saxo Bank or Swissquote or wherever else, and you're putting it into this place where it's just frankly not as good an environment for self-managed investments. However, that's not necessarily the end of the world because you have great trade-offs in other regards. So we like it quite a bit. So Switzerland would be number 2. Number 3, I would say, is probably the US, actually. And some people like to bash the US. They say, it's so terrible, et cetera. All the conspiracy theories, et cetera, talk about, the downfall of the US dollar. Reality is we're a long ways from the US dollar collapsing. Okay, so that's pretty unlikely. You also have to realize that the senators, congressmen, etc., all have their money typically in US banks, and they have an unlimited ability to print money and to bail the banks out. So you can just ask, what is the likelihood that they're going to allow Bank of America, Chase, Wells Fargo, Citi, etc., to go under? The answer is pretty low, right? These are quite solid banks with quite solid banking system backing them up. If you look even at, say, big banks that went under in something like the 2008 financial collapse, for example, Washington Mutual, no depositors lost any money. It was absorbed by JP Morgan Chase, and that was that. So generally your money's pretty safe in major US banks. Okay, so that's our number 3 place. Our number 4 place, I would say, is UAE. And so you can, if you pick First Abu Dhabi Bank, Abu Dhabi Commercial Bank, Emirates NDB, etc., like these are pretty solid regional banks. And what I like about them is that they tend to be non-correlated to some of these other places. So are they, the best banking experience in the world? Some of them are pretty decent, depends on the bank. Some of them have better apps, some of them have worse, but overall you get a generally pretty good quality banking experience. And the banks are pretty solid regionally, well capitalized, etc. And so these, I think, are a good place to go for something that's quite a bit diverse. It's diversified away from something like US banks, right? So you have a non-correlated environment. So we like that. And finally, number 5, I would say, is typically the Channel Islands. So this is typically Jersey, could be Jersey, Guernsey, and Isle of Man in theory. Isle of Man, of course, is not a Channel Island, but kind of falls into the same halo. These are good because of the fact that the entry point is easier. So usually, around 100,000 minimum deposit, you can open a bank account in Channel Islands. Whereas, again, in Switzerland, you're talking about $1 million, right? So for people who want maybe a little bit of a lower entry point, you can still get high quality banking. You can still get access to lots of great services. If you're going to invest in real estate in UK, then they'll provide loans for you, etc. So there's some really good facilities available there. So these would be the 5 places that I think, when I think of, okay, where's my money going to be quite secure, that I can spread it out between different places, these would be my recommendation. So we'd love to hear from you. If you have other ones that you think I missed, I guess I can run through a few for you quickly. Andorra, I consider too fragile, too small, too separated out. Liechtenstein, mini Switzerland, some people would mention, not a bad option, but just doesn't offer the same degree of things that you can get in Switzerland. So the point of it is less. You could look at some of the other Southeast Asian banks. You could look at, for example, Hong Kong. Traditionally, I feel like kind of what's changed geopolitically has made Hong Kong less attractive and less stable. So generally we would stay away from there. The environment in Indonesia, Malaysia, etc., not as good as Singapore. So I would tend to rule them out. Latin America in general, we would just discard. In other parts of Europe, it's typically difficult to open bank accounts as an individual. And usually the way that if they're part of the Eurozone, they lack autonomy over themselves. So that's a little bit of an issue as well. So hence we narrow down to these ones. I guess the one that people may ask about is Cayman. Difficult to open accounts in Cayman in most situations. And generally speaking, I would say it is more at risk of having correspondent banking relationships severed and things like this. So typically I would consider it to be somewhat lower tier than these 5. So anyway, I hope that helps. Let me know in the comments below. If you have any questions, reach out to us if you need help. And I'm going to look forward to seeing you on the next video.